Hello, and welcome to the South Coast Artists Index, where artists, performers, and writers, as well as curators, directors, and supporters, anyone with ties to the creative community, drops by to introduce themselves to you. We'll talk about their beginnings, their vision, their passion, and so much more. The South Coast Artists Index podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere.
Hi, this is Ron Fortier with another episode of the In Focus podcast brought to you by the Artists Index. And today, we're going to have a couple of guests together for something a little bit different, which all of a sudden I had a flashback to the Rocky and Bullwinkle show. But anyway, guest number one. Could you please introduce yourself and spell your name? You know the routine.
Happy to. My name is Jeff Angeley. Last name is Angeley, and I am a Jeff with a J. And this is,
sorry, I don't
here
know.
with me, co-director of the festival. This is Christian Camarao, so I'll let him do his thing.
My name's Christian Camarao. My first name is spelt like the religion, and my last name is spelt like the Portuguese word for shrimp. So Camarao.
You forgot.
Yeah, it's tricky, you know.
It's funny because the first thing in my head is like he's named after a religion and a shrimp.
Yeah, it's pretty easy. Yeah, no, it's a lot of vowels, you know.
Yeah.
Challenge your listeners to call and see if they can spell it.
Yeah, and nobody's ever going to say your name is Christian Camarao.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Well, one of the reasons that I asked Jeff to come on the show is because of what's been going on with his new venture, I venture to say, no pun intended. And I think I'm just going to let him jump right in there and talk to us about it, because it's kind of historic. I mean, there's a lot of things that have led to this moment, and Jeff will tell us all about it.
Yeah, sure. Well, we're both actually equal party to this. Christian and I worked on everything equally last year. We're working on everything equally this year, putting together a festival called Bedford Roots Branches Festival. I guess in some ways it does indeed sit in like a line, like in a queue where there's a tradition behind it. We are doing something pretty different in a lot of ways. We're not a folk festival as such, and we're not a traditional music festival as such. We do put on a festival that has folk and traditional elements, and we certainly benefit from a long-standing tradition of festivals, and our piggybacking on the end of one that existed before certainly gave us a momentum that was really nice to have in place. But the festival itself that we put on, we go by a slogan that Christian came up with, and he can tell you that if he wants to.
Yeah, by the people, for the people, you know. This is like a festival that we're not outsourcing the talent from, other parts of the country. It's really supposed to be as much for the local community of musicians as it is for the local community of concert goers. So we really try to have a focus on hiring people from our community, for people who might not have as much clout or presence as other artists that might be able to like finance a tour or do travel for a festival and really spotlighting hey, you don't have to be from somewhere else to do something wonderful, or you don't there's real incredible talent happening right here, right now, at this present moment. So in a way, it does line up with the South Coast Index podcast. There were people at this time. They came from all different backgrounds and walks of life, and instead of kind of waiting until after everybody's gone, I'm like, I guess that was a cool thing that happened. Let's spotlight it now.
Yeah, I think we're really at a moment right now where this is more possible than it might have been in a lot of different ways too. I mean, from a production standpoint, yes, but also, I don't know, I think back 15, 20 years ago and sourcing a full festival off of predominantly hyper-local talent, and then just kind of slightly beyond that regional talent would have been a lot harder to pull off. There are a lot of people making really wonderful things happen right now. It's one of those things where it's like, do you keep the light under a bushel? We've had these kind of conversations. It's really, really special right now. And it is the kind of thing that I hear things all the time that I'm like, oh, wow, this could actually kind of blow up. It's nice so far that it hasn't, although I wish everybody lots of success. We have, whatever you say, like an embarrassment of riches as far as the ability to source whole stages, like we, and then, just the community as a whole. I mean, one of the things that this festival is very different for, I think, I can't say that these are original ideas, but a lot of the things that we try to do are more in line with folk festivals or music festivals that are outside of the area than ones that existed here before. Certainly, I would say a lot of the inspiration that I have for the vision of what I'd like to see is close to Lowell in a lot of ways. I love the way that, like, you go to the Lowell Folk Festival, they have a significant Cambodian population, they have Cambodian music. They have a significant Greek population, they have Greek music. They have a significant Puerto Rican community there, they have Puerto Rican music. They have traditional Irish music. They have not only representatives of people who would play music for the communities that exist there, but a lot of times those bands are they are the folks that are playing in Lowell anyway. And they exist within a broader festival that has all kinds of stuff going on, but it's very representative. And it's not hard to find talent here if you are looking to spotlight the many different things that people do, because there's a lot of things that happen here.
Yeah, there are a lot. In fact, when you were talking about other festivals, the first one that popped in my head was Lowell. It's if you've gone once, you've gone 10 times, 100 times, it's always memorable. And the one show I remember the most, and I'd love to be able to find out more about it, just to make sure that I'm not hallucinating. It was either the Navajo or the Apache polka band, which
cool.
was a mind-blowing. I mean,
Awesome, yeah.
It basically is either Apache, a reservation, or a Navajo reservation where Polish Catholic missionaries, were there to save souls, and they taught them how to play polka music on accordions.
Wow. Yeah.
Which is, and then of course you always bring a little of your culture, and that's, people call it fusion, but it's a whole other thing.
Yeah, there's a whole, the same thing, like mostly Great Lakes, but there's a whole fiddle style that's
Métis?
Yeah, Métis fiddle playing is built out of
Métis, it's
a combination of Native American. It's Native American players,
right,
who would have learned the instrument when it came in their direction.
Yeah. Métis means half. So, or they used to use the term half-breed, and basically it was the Canuck or the Canadian, the French who intermarried with the native peoples, and their children became known as Métis or halves. The other thing too is, I'm going back to SMU, Southeastern Massachusetts University. Mm-hmm. Howard Glasser, our calligraphy teacher, also ran the Eisteddfods and the Cayleys. So he brought island music, not Martha's Vineyard. The British Isles, he had British musical theater there. And then, as far as I know of, just staying in New Bedford proper, Paul Clayton, who was the man, he was one of the godfathers, grandfathers, fathers of folk music, that revival that began in the United States, and he was a contemporary with Dylan. You can enlighten us more on that.
One of his greatest songs.
Yeah.
Don't Think Twice, It's All Right is a Paul Clayton song.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a Paul Clayton song that was appropriated.
Steal it, don't think twice, it's all right.
Yeah.
Wow. And then the previous iterations, your predecessors, just briefly, who were they? It was the New Bedford Folk Festival, and how long were they in business? And
so, immediately before us, New Bedford Folk Festival had a run of like 25 years. The last couple of years of their production, they were under the auspices of the Zeiterion. They still had the same. Well, initially it was a creation of the Korolenkos, Alan and Helene Korolenko, and they, in their later years, were looking to move off like the really difficult funding work part of things, the bigger production aspects of it. And those got taken on by the Z, and ultimately the Z decided that they didn't want to be doing that anymore. I have heard conversations about some of the speculation behind that, but I was not in any of the rooms where any of those decisions were made, so I'd rather not repeat anything that I heard. But for whatever reason, they decided that they were moving on from the festival. Korolenkos have a relationship with those Eisteddfod festivals. They kind of come out of that tradition. And the New Bedford Festival did bear some resemblance to that festival in that there was typically a pretty heavy traditional Celtic component to the New Bedford Folk Festival, like a substantial percentage of the music presented was in that tradition. And then the Korolenkos had a real love for singer-songwriter music, and they brought that to their festival, and they had a lot of like songwriter in the round kind of things. I guess that's what that festival was most known for, was putting multiple acts on the same stage and getting some kind of interplay between them, conversation and stuff like that. So
Yeah,
they were there 25 years before.
Yeah, that's a long time. Yeah. And the issue at hand is always with that kind of event organization legacy. Adrian Teo and I were having a conversation way back when about how things used to be at SMU. And I worked at one time as a set designer for the opera department. And people like, there's no opera department at UMass. Yeah, there was. But unfortunately, they were cultures of personality. And when those personalities, the drivers of those cultures, of those events, passed on, so did the dream. But rolling back a little bit about picking the apples from your own tree, Jeff and I have been doing this, Jeff Watton and I have been doing this for a while, right up to the point where we've just become officially a nonprofit. And the amount of musicians in this area is staggering. And what's even more staggering, or just plain cool, is nearly all the musicians know each other. They've played with each other. They've produced for each other. It's a wonderful incestuous community of musicians.
Yeah, musicians tend to be that way anyway. But I mean, I can say I moved out of town at one point in time, tried to do a bunch of touring, lived in different places, and it's disappointing a lot of places. Not every place is a place where people are really kind of rooting for each other and trying to bring each other up. I mean, when I first landed here, was playing shows in places where, the lineups in contemporary settings might seem kind of more normal. You see like rock band lineups now that are kind of bizarre. But back then it was weird to see, like a poet followed by a metal band, followed by somebody playing a jazz trumpet, followed by a bluegrass band, But it was not weird here, and it wasn't weird to share bills with people that had like really different lineups, and it has always been true in my experience and continues to be true that everybody's pulling for each other. So
I go see shows, every week, and the wonderful thing about living here is that I can, walk like 5 minutes from one venue to the next and catch like something wildly different from the last, and like there's no the level of like there's a quantity of talent. There's like a lot of people doing really interesting things, but also the quality of like the talent they're in like is also like really solid. I really don't think that like it's this question of like, well, like, do you have like a really, excellent festival where you're hiring the best people, or do you do like the, supposed like charity work of hiring locally to give like people a spotlight? And it's really not an either or thing. Like the people who are living and working here now are like, they're incredible. Like there's really no other way to put it. Like we are really, specifically as someone who I'm 24 years old. I'm younger than the festival you guys were talking about. Like I really don't know anything like about that. I don't have like the lived experience of like having gone to it for like 25 years. And so like when we talk about like doing this. It's really just like, what's the coolest thing that I could see, on a stage in this city, like who's out there, who's making moves, like who deserves to be, or who should be spotlighted. So yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because the musical heritage of this area runs wide and deep, and now we have more people coming in. We have a lot of people from Mesoamerica, Latin America, South America, and there's also more immigrants coming in from Africa as well, and that's going to start to affect the music in a lot of ways, as it does with the arts. It's just with anything else. I mean. This was a big jazz city at one time. Mm-hmm. There were several major jazz venues, and what I mean by major is on the jazz circuit. And we've got names that are associated with international fame. There's from my mother's background, my mother was a club singer, but primarily a fado singer, which is Portuguese traditional music. There was a big circuit. There was always something going on. Of course, we popped out the supergroup, as they refer to them as, Tavares. And that's just scratching the surface. Yeah. And then now, I mean, we had Jeff doing the traditional music. We had Scott Bishop doing the indie music, and then pitching in on some of the everything in betweens. And between the two of them, it's like, wow. I mean, we might have to get one or two more music hosts to narrow down, somebody, we want to get a jazz host, for example. But there's just so much going on. And going back to my day and age, where a garage band was pretty much somebody would borrow their old man's Fisher reel to reel, and that was like, oh my God, that was like high tech back then. But now people have the capacity to produce on their own, slightly better facilities. And the next person who says there's nothing to do will be smacked. Because every single night of the week, somebody is somewhere. And I think maybe, people cringe when I say the gifts of COVID. COVID was horrible in many ways to many people and deadly, but it did bring its gifts to others. And I think one of those things is the musical community discovered what it was like to coalesce when there were no gigs to be had. And, did Roots and Branches come from that at all? Because it just seems like it came on the tail end of what we thought was the end, which...
No, I'd say no. I think, a real direct answer to where we started is pretty simple to arrive at. I heard last February, just coming up on a year ago, for the first time, that the folk festival was out, that they were not going to do it again. I had been asking, because we played on the South Coast stage the year before on the festival, and I had been asking, sending emails to the Korolenkos and to a friend who was the host of that particular stage. And she kept saying, I don't know, I'm not hearing anything. I think that there's something up. And then in February, we heard that the festival was off. I sat down with Christian and our good friend Sam Babineau and Steve from We All Play in a Band together. And I said to them, hey, this is an opportunity. If we take it now and we do a good job with it, then we could build something in the spirit of what we would love to see, kind of in perpetuity. But it will be backbreaking and almost impossible, because we're going to try to run a festival that all the production will happen between March and July. That should take solidly 12 months and probably more likely 15 months to prepare for a year's festival. And we did it, and it was as grueling as we thought it would be. There were lengthy periods of not sleeping or eating leading right up to it. There was a lot of fear about how you fund a festival, because we made commitments to having people there and telling them that we would pay them before we were able to completely secure all of the sponsorships and stuff like that. And I mean, again, we're not working on the kind of production. Nobody's flying anybody in from Italy and feeding them and housing them for 3 days. But it was the kind of thing that it was like, the hedge against the ability to pay for the festival was pretty much our checking accounts.
Yeah, I mean,
you know?
like we were outside of a grant writing cycle too.
Yeah,
So,
we were
like,
way outside of
So
it.
we have a free festival wherein we don't like the day of we're not going to make any money. It's
$0.
literally $0. So like I am a school teacher, and like we're all kind of like in an educational field. So it's like great. We have to figure out how to like basically come up with like a decent, like kind of stomach dropping amount of money to make this thing happen in a crazy short amount of time.
Yeah, just to run a local festival that's, like we were 6 hours long last year. 6 hours, 6 stages. The acts plus the sound people plus, whatever kind of signs and
Lights.
advertisement and all that kind of stuff that
Working
goes
with
into
the city
things.
as well, right? I mean, you have to post like $1 million bond, right, for insurance?
No, actually, it's very, very. We have a wonderful relationship with the city. I could not say enough nice things.
Yeah.
We work directly with Destination New Bedford. We had conversations with them really early on, and they said that they were interested in making us a city-sponsored event, which we continue to be. And that actually, I didn't realize until I was talking to somebody else who does some other work not that long ago, exactly how. I mean, I was always very grateful, but just how much that does for us, because we did not have the obstacles of having to pay for spaces or having to worry about infrastructure or security or anything like
Right,
that.
paying for police.
That's something that the
paying for
city
insurance.
takes on for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and they've been really, really helpful. Yeah, so I mean, like we swung it. We got enough sponsors. We did get some support from the city, from a different city organization. We get support from New Bedford Creative, which is part of the New Bedford Economic Development Council. We were outside of the grant cycle, but they were able to, for 1 year, find enough funds to help us with a portion of what we were doing, and they sponsored a couple stages. We got sponsorship from Symphony Music Shop, who's like just absolutely consistently supporting everything that's happening musically around here, from the smallest, most obscure kind of happenings to the most large-scale stuff, things that happen in big theaters and in public schools and stuff like that.
Williams?
Bob Williams.
Bob Williams.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we also had sound support from them in addition to the sound professionals that we hired. They provided substantial equipment and help. We had sponsorship from Fiber Optic Center and, Neil and Ether. Again, just like talking about the city and what's possible in the city because of who's here.
Yeah.
Those guys are consistent supporters of culture, consistent philanthropic supporters of downtown culture, and we had sponsorship from the New Bedford Economic Development Council, in addition to smaller tier sponsors as well. But all of those folks, those larger contributions, ended up being the things in the end that were like, okay, well, we still got to keep hustling, but at least we can pay the people who are coming.
Yeah. I mean, I think gone are the days, and thankfully, gone are the days where people expect artists to do things for nothing because it's fun.
Well, we didn't want any part of that.
Right.
And, we are, however, very cognizant of some of the conversations that you had earlier about, how somebody has a dream and then the dream dies with the person, And so there's a couple of things here. Like, I mean, that's forever on my mind as somebody who creates things. Trying to create something that has a life beyond just what we do, which means an eventual expansion into spaces where we have other people who are just kind of like lightly funding and saying, hey, why don't you put a stage over in this direction, right? Or encouraging places to be involved, adjacent to what we're doing in a way that is actually part of what we're doing. And then also, I fully believe that locally and regionally we have the talent to support a festival that's outstanding. It's more what I want to see than if we were bringing in people from all over the place. And it also turns out that is really cost effective. I mean, if we are, and it's like that is a world truth. That's not just putting on a festival. You know, if you're flying your oranges in from the other side of the world, these things are not ultimately supportable, and they're not good for anybody. And so, supporting really great music that's here already is something that makes it possible to put on a festival that's really decent in scale and can be done at a tier that, you know, if a grant didn't come through or if a sponsor didn't come through or what have you, it wouldn't mean that the festival died in a day or a week or a year. And it would mean that if somebody else after us wanted to keep on keeping on with it, it wouldn't be the kind of production juggernaut that would make somebody say, well, we spend, you know, 6 months of our year really working hard on this, the largest piece of our budget, and it's at best like a break-even thing. We probably lose a little bit of money and just get face and advertisement from the fact that we're involved in it. Because there's you know, as much as we were saying that there was $0 in place before last year's festival, and there's $0 made on the day of the festival. There's $0 to be gained from any of this. I mean, there's loss to be got from all of it. That's about it.
Yeah.
You know?
But you know, like, this is like a massive undertaking. It's safe to say that without the support of the people that Jeff mentioned, right? Like, if it wasn't for like people from every single sector of the community, like really pitching in, then like, you know, it's safe to say there wouldn't have been a festival, right? Like we earnestly got together and said, we want to make something that we would want to see, wherein we, you know, hire people from this area. Mm-hmm. And if we had been somewhere else where people were like, like, you know, that music stuff is fine, but like, well, I don't, like, I got better things to do. Like, if people were just kind of a little bit like apathetic, then it wouldn't have happened. We would have just been kind of like a group of people just being like, hey, like, we have this dream. And then people would have been like, that's nice. Like, I have dreams too. I have dreams of watching like Sunday Night Football, and they don't involve you, you know? So, without those things, we wouldn't really have any.
Well, you know, there's been a big shift in attitude among people in general. People are finding much more value in the things that are closest to home. And I think a lot of it has to do is because a lot of things that have gone on in this area have gone outwards nationally and internationally, whether it's movies, whether it's anything else. So that now there's this, you know, people love to drop names, you know, and people love to be living in a place that's doing well. Of course, as soon as there's a downturn, well, that's going to be a struggle and a thing. You were talking about having this thing, this Roots and Branches going on. It's the same thing with the Artist Index. I mean, the money that we take in is to pay people to help us document more people. So it's Stone Soup. And I think that's almost the same model as what you guys have at Stone Soup. You know, everybody in the community pitches in and everybody benefits from it. You know, nobody walks away fat and happy, so to speak. And that's a great thing. And, you know, from, you know, not to play on the tree thing, but from acorns, you know, mighty oaks grow.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I think that, you know, like, we'll extend this metaphor. The whole idea with the branches, you know, the like roots and branches of the festival, this is not like we were saying at the beginning. We talked a lot about putting the festival on, but more about what the festival is. Aside from just being local, the vision of this thing is that it is mostly acoustic, but it is not confined by genre, you know. So we're not putting on a folk festival. We're not putting on a traditional music festival. We're not putting on a rock festival. We're not putting on a jazz festival. We're not putting on a Cape Verdean music festival, but we are putting on all of those things, you know. So we have traditional music from several different places. We have participatory music areas. We have an avant-garde stage that is pretty out, you know. We have a stage that's, I guess you would call it indie folk if you had to. It's kind of chambery. It might even be closer to like a chamber folk kind of sound last year. But that's an eclectic stage. I mean, like something that's not really chambery could fit on that stage. We do have a venue that we worked with that was what people would think of as folk. It was like a person or two people that were songwriters in a small, quiet, intimate listening room, you know. But we also have a stage it's pretty much an acoustic rock band stage, you know. There are totally rock bands there. And then, you know, we get your kind of eclectic, like any kind of dance music, as far as like, you know, a band, your neighbors with Rick Smith. So like you get the Jethros, they always bring kind of a dance audience, and it's somewhere between a rock band and like klezmer or jazz. And that fits very well with, you know, I guess what I would say is the contemporary vision of Cape Verdean music, as I can understand it, where like, you know, everybody's traditional music evolves and changes, right? And traditional music is not a static thing that's stuck in one place. And Cape Verdean traditional music, from what I can tell, is still very traditional, but has more likely a mix of like drums or electric instruments and stuff like that.
I mean, that happened with Fado. I mean, with Marisa, you know, became an international star. Of course, you got the traditionalists that are like all scrunchy faced and, you know, hate it because it's not traditional. Well, it came from tradition, and now it becomes its own tradition. And where does it evolve? I mean, who would have ever thought of mixing Fado music with saxophone or with piano? Or drums. I mean, I remember there was like a huge, like, oh my God, the drums. But you know what? The old rule of thumb for PR is it doesn't matter what people are saying as long as people are talking about you. And that's the big thing. So what were some of the highlights from last year? And if you can give us any indication of what you might do this coming year.
I mean, honestly, there was just like a beautiful moment last year wherein it was around 4:00 and I realized that the festival was happening without any input from myself. Like, it was just like kind of, you build this thing from the ground up, and you basically we started in February, like, you know, March, like you basically for a span of, 5 months, every conceivable waking moment that's not spent like working, sleeping, and I would say eating, but like I was definitely thinking about when I was eating is like, what is going to happen on that like late July day, you know, like what is going to happen? Will it get there? And those were questions that like I was happy. There was no question like, you know, towards the later months, like May, June, July, like that, you know, the festival would happen, but it was kind of like, you know, like, can we build this thing? This, like me and Jeff, like, and Sam and Steve, like, can we build this thing to sustain, you know, like the pressures and expectations that like people are putting on it? And there was like the fact that I was able to sit down and eat a sandwich on that day, and like nobody was like, there was nothing awful happening. People were like smiling and having fun. Like, it was awesome, you know. That was like, for me, that was the standout moment of the festival. Like, it was like just the fact that we had, you know, pulled it off. Like, there were acts that I saw that I was like, you know, so happy because not only because like they were excellent, but also because like in some way it reflected like the kind of you know, passing of the torch. Like, you know, we kind of made we created the opportunity for this to happen, and now it is happening, and it's beautiful and wonderful.
Built a bridge.
Yeah, you know, like people are, and it's a different kind of joy than like making art, you know, like making like a record where it, like, you know, if I write like a record and stuff, I want people to like kind of engage with like the thematic material, and there's like a weird like, you know, like selfish component of like, I want you to tell me all the nice things you thought about this song I wrote, you know. But like with the festival, it was like watching like, you know, like you said, like a bridge, like, you know, watching someone use something that you created, and really like kind of put it through the ringer and watching it hold up, you know. I felt like I just felt, really incredibly proud that like nobody was crying. I wasn't crying. And then my favorite set was, probably Carl Simmons.
Yeah, I think actually, you know, talking about Carl, I would say one of the things that was really special about last year's festival is everybody I spoke to went to a different festival. We all went to the same festival, and yet we went to a different festival.
Yeah.
The stages were, because we tried to be broad, the stages were different enough that you could have spent the day playing in traditional jams and seeing traditional music. You could have spent the day checking out like avant-garde and outsider folk music. You could, and it really was. It was really kind of crazy. Like, you know, we got to the end of the day, those of us who worked on the festival, and we were like, "Hey, where did you go when we weren't, you know, doing stuff?" And it was like, I never saw the inside of that stage. There were places that I never went, and people tell me about their experience of the festival from the perspective. They were like, it was totally full. The audience energy was really high. Like the bands were great. I'm like, I never even went in there. And now I spent a portion of my day in the Destination Stoop stage, which was that super quiet stage. And I think it was like the same thing. I got to my 4 o'clock in the day, and I was just like, you know, like I'm at the break point. There's nothing more I can do. Yeah. And I went into this room, and it was just like, stepping into music church, you know, like completely secular, of course. But like it was, you know, it was a way to be at a festival and also feel like I had gone to a quiet listening room where somebody was singing directly to me. And I think that is something that we aim for more of. And we've built more stages this year. We're going to be shutting off a piece of a street as well. But keeping this idea intact of having as many different kinds of experiences musically as we can. I mean, there is a unifying theme there. It's an acoustic music festival, but it's again, it's not a folk festival, but it is a folk festival, and it's not a rock music festival.
And I think
a rock music festival. It is all of those things at the same time.
We're kind of, you know, we base our decisions less on genre, like, you know, these really like strict definitions of genre, and more so like on like who is someone who is here, like who is in this greater South Coast region that is making stuff that's interesting and should be platformed. You know, like Jeff, you brought up, you know, the Cape Verdean music, you know, and sort of like your perceptions of what traditional Cape Verdean music is. You know, like we're not in a position to really like tell someone who is like, you know, represents like a portion of the population in New Bedford, like, hey, sorry, like your music has like a drum machine in it, so it doesn't count. You know, especially when you know, we had Pepe Bana last year, just like this incredible, you know, dynamic set that got people. People were dancing, and it got people from like, you know, different communities that otherwise like would kind of think that, you know, like wouldn't interact, right? Like this is this type of music stage, this is this type of music stage, and we're all just going to go to our own like separate little like areas. But everybody was just reveling in the moment, and just it was just like pure joy and bliss. It was and so I think like moving on to the next festival, it's kind of following that as like an example, right? Like building something that is more representative of just kind of doubling down on everything.
I'd say too with the Cape Verdean music thing. I mean, that went pretty much how I expected it would at Folk Festival. Yeah. You know, it's something that was really refreshing to see, and it's like what are we, like 2 blocks from the band club? You know, I mean, it's not hard to understand how that music could be supported really well at the festival and could support a community that is in the neighborhood that the Cape Verdean music is made in already, you know. So, I mean, that's the thing that we're expanding on. We actually, you know, the hardest thing as far as being representative is concerned is this an ongoing challenge, but fortunately we have inroads with Cape Verdean music at this point. We have a few different people that we can work with. But it's tough at the beginning because, you know, when you talk about like things being divided by genres, and you talk about musical community that is really connected, everybody kind of seems to know each other. It's true and it's not, you know. It's true in that I probably know interconnecting pieces between a lot of different groups of people. But it is also true that just like the rest of society, when we get into certain areas, whether they be on neighborhood lines or ethnic lines or what have you. Sometimes in this city, linguistic lines, it's very difficult to make the first leap of connection, right? So we worked really hard last year, like harder than we did on any other singular thing to get people from the Spanish-speaking communities at the festival playing. And we came up short last year, but we already have actionable plans for this coming year. And from what I've seen with working with different communities of people that were not people that I had direct musical connection to in the past, once something's successful once, it's way easy to do it twice. And if it's successful once and you go to do it the second time, it's so common because, you're saying like musicians know musicians. Mm-hmm. Well, you get Pepe Bana. We have Pepe Bana on the festival this year because Pepe Bana is friends of John Miranda's band. And Nay Miranda is somebody that I had hired Nay Miranda and his brother's band for another festival that I did years ago. Originally, we actually had hired them, but it turned out that they were not going to be around at that time. They told us really early, and they were like, hey, you should talk to Pepe Bana. He'd be perfect for your festival. So hopefully this year we'll have Pepe Bana and we'll have the Miranda band, And I'd like to work with Hamilton Tavares. He doesn't know me from anybody, so if he's hearing this now, hey, we're coming for you. But you get the idea, and then just to extend this in one more direction, but like you said, what's new for next year, or for this year rather, we do have a couple more stages. We have the ability to expand in that way, at least 2 more, possibly 3 more stages. And we also have a Friday night kickoff event, which is unique, not only in that it is a day before that we didn't have before, but it is a different event. It is not just music on a stage. We're putting together moving panoramas. We're going to have a series of moving panoramas that are commissioned, where artists will make moving panoramas that are set to pieces of music. The pieces of music will be performed on stage with the panorama pieces going by. So we'll have a Friday night kickoff event. It'll be just like a couple hours. It'll give us a chance to ring out the stress music test. Equipment, stress test, get some people out to see something that'll be really special. And it is another thing that, New Bedford-wise, this is tied to, obviously, the giant moving panorama. Mm-hmm. The panorama of a whaling voyage around the world, right? And it's also like a thing that these kind of like, they call them cranky boxes in the folk world. Cranky box festivals exist, but they're few and far between. And we think that we can offer something that's really special. It's a really genuinely different, a unique experience that will meld well with the musical component and give us a real opportunity to give people something exciting to get started with their festival weekend with.
Yeah, it's almost like the term from my generation, when you have all of this stuff going on, it's like Heinz 57 varieties. You got all this stuff, and it's something a little bit for everyone, and a lot for some people. Which makes it great.
Yeah, and the pieces of the puzzle are all there, right? Like the Cranky Box Festival, like. Jeff, you had that idea from like seeing the moving panorama like at the Whaling Museum, right? It's like,
you only went back 160 years in time.
Yeah,
I knew that was there, and when I saw some people making smaller ones, just these like, they're like 2 feet by 3 feet or something like that. And I was like, I want to do that.
Yeah,
I'm not a visual artist at all. I was very interested in visual art stuff when I was young. And I worked really hard at it, but just being honest, like it's the same thing as playing an instrument, right? Like I have not poured my time into that skill set. So conceptually, I have ideas, but execution-wise, I'm not there. So, but it's something that I thought of. I thought immediately, I'm in love with this, and I would like to make these for like a record that I make or something like that. And then we were brainstorming on ideas for a kickoff, and I was just like, what about this? And Christian was way in on it too, and it does have that connection to the giant moving panorama that's related to here, and And, in that time period, that was like the height of, we're talking pre-movies. These are the movies before there were movies.
Yeah.
So.
And, like, it's a part of the festival that, like, just like the people that we bring on is reflective of the city that it takes place in, there are, like, this is a huge, like, Luso-American community. And why is it because of that? It's because, like, in the 1800s, Azorians made exceptional whalers, and then they came back to New Bedford to continue whaling. And now the reason why, like, I'm here today is because, like, my family from the mainland came to a place where there was a pre-existing, like, Portuguese population that made sense. And, like, we're not so much creating, like, an original thing. We're, like, just highlighting the different parts of the city that already exist. We're reflecting, the history, the culture of the city kind of back at itself, like, and taking a moment to just revel, in, like, how unique, how beautiful and wonderful, like, this place in the world is, because there really are not a lot of places like it. Like, a couple weeks ago, I was, at Co-Creative, at the Co-Creative building. Underneath there was a dance going on, like the Body dance series run by Andy Anello, and I went and I checked that out, and then walked not even 3 minutes. I walked 3 minutes, and it was the night of the Moby Dick marathon, and I sat for a couple hours and listened to people read Moby Dick. There were people from all over the world, people from Australia, people from California, like, that had come to our city because it's amazing, it's really wonderful. So to even be, like, a part of making, kind of contributing to it, I think is an incredible opportunity.
It's just so much. I was just thinking of the Chieftains, their CD. I guess nobody calls them albums anymore. Maybe they are again. I don't know. But they came out with Santiago, and they were out playing in Europe, and I think they were in Galicia, and they heard some fiddle and music going in some squeeze box, and they're looking at each other going, "We're in Spain. Why does it sound so Celtic?" And then they didn't realize that, my mother drilled this into me. The Portuguese are made up of the Celts in the north, the Celtiberians in the center, and the Phoenicians in the south. The hair and eyes change. That's the skin, the complexion as you're going down. And if you go into those, they play the pipes, the Irish pipes in the north of Portugal. So there's just so much to explore. There's so much to do. And you're talking about the cranky boxes. I'm wondering, are you guys going to go retro to the 70s and get an overhead projector with a Corning ware bake dish with water and food coloring to make all the psychedelic?
That's a great idea.
Yeah, that's what they used to project on the backgrounds of bands back then.
You heard it here first.
It was all this stuff that, like, floating around. You put a little oil in there and you start to see it. But anyway, this has been great. I'm really looking forward to this. We got folks coming in from out of town this summer, and thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Well, folks, that wraps up another one. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time on the In Focus podcast, brought to you by the Artist Index. Bye-bye.
We'll see you next week for another episode of the South Coast Artist Index podcast. To learn more about the South Coast Artist Index, visit theartistindex.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.